We are back at the wonderful world of Randy and another fantastic experience in the wonderful world of Randy's collection. And you get to see it and share it right here along with me. And right now, we are over at one of my favorite things. And I really say that. I mean, I don't like to play favorites because there's so many things that I really, really love. And particularly when it comes to Disney and my experiences there, because I had such a good time going to the parks as a kid and such great memories. But interestingly enough, and you come to realize it through experiences, the most cherished memories that are made with bonding of personalities with the people. And that can not only be your family, it can be people who you happen to meet or go to the parks with, or it could be people that you know through going to the parks that are either cast members doing the same job that you see them every time you go there. And I remember that guy, he was there last year, he's walking a treadmill somewhere. And there are people who are at the same attraction for many years. But there's some people who are in shows who are the lead roles and they are always there. And when you go there and you see that same person, it's like seeing an old friend. And it's really, really amazing how you can draw a bond with somebody who at that point you probably really never met. In Walt Disney World, we went every year, and particularly in the beginning, the people who were there as cast members in many positions were there the next year, the year after that, and you got to see the faces, and it was the same thing with me. You loved to meet the people. They were living the dream. They were what we wanted to be. They were staying there when we went back home again. They were there forever. They were in the fantasy bubble. And one of the shows that really held a tight connection, I think for everybody, including myself, was the Diamond Horseshoe Revue. Now, the show closed, the Diamond Horseshoe Revue closed, I believe it was 1986. So a lot of the viewers out there who are younger or too young to remember even ever seeing the show, it's important for you to understand what was. The Diamond Horseshoe Revue was a saloon in Frontierland, and it was supposed to be a Western saloon where you could feel like you're going back in the Old West into the iconic saloon of the Western town. And the bar would be along the side, but of course it was Disney World, so they did not serve alcohol. The old joke would be, what are you serving? Sarsaparilla. Well, today people even don't know what sarsaparilla is. At the bar, they didn't serve alcohol. They served ice cream. They served soft drinks. You went in and there were tables all around the floor, which is a hardwood floor, to give it the atmosphere. And it was shaped in a horseshoe. Wider in the back, a little bit thinner in the front, and their theme was the Diamond Horseshoe. The end where it was thinner had a stage, and was only maybe 4 steps up. It wasn't a really high stage. It was actually kind of small in the realm of stages go, probably smaller than the stage at your high school. But on that stage was magic, 5 shows a day. And it really, really was. It was another free show back in the days when they had, A, B, C, D, and E tickets. But the shows only had so much capacity because it wasn't an omnimover where there was a continuous line, endless line of people going through it. They had just so many seats. So in the beginning, people waited in line on the front porch before the show was even over, waiting for the next show, which was going to start maybe an hour later. And they would hope to get in. It became such a thing of disappointment for a lot of people waiting in line that they couldn't get in the show, that they started a reservation system, the early form of reservation systems for attractions at Walt Disney World. And they had a balcony that was around the perimeter of the horseshoe where there were tables of 2 and tables of 4, and you could lean on the banister and look down and see the show and see down on the people. They would come before the show started, and they would have waiters and waitresses dressed in period costumes, looking very, very dapper, and they would try to sell you cookies, chips, soda, sandwiches, and they had little special names for these sandwiches, like the Slewfoot Sue, which maybe it was a turkey sandwich, but it's so much better when it's the Slewfoot Sue. And you could buy nothing if you didn't want to, but most of the time people would get a snack, and the waiters and waitresses would go to the bar and they would get it, and they would come back with their tray and they would deliver it right at your table, and people could have lunch right there at the Diamond Horseshoe Revue, waiting for the show to start. This was like the before the show, the experience that they're giving you, the experience of being in the saloon. So then, finally, just before it is showtime, the red curtains, velvet curtains, would open at the stage, and there would be a backdrop, and the announcer recorded would come on, and he would tell you about the Magic Lantern picture show that was going to be given now to you, presented to you for your enjoyment while you're eating. And it was basically a slideshow. And it ran maybe 5 minutes. And the slides were really neat. It was done by an automated projector that would actually move the carousel so you could see the slide moving in, and sometimes they'd move this way or that way because they had different carousel rings on the projector. Really interesting machine. I have one, but that's another story. It's sitting on my house in Florida, so I don't think you're going to get to see it on one of these videos anytime soon. But they would show these funny pictures, and they would have little sayings. So you'd really want to, take a longer look at the picture, because there'd be a little funny saying on the bottom thing. I remember, a few of the pictures in particular. There was, an ugly lady sitting next to a lion, and on the bottom it would say "Beauty and the Beast." So, which one's the beauty, which one's the beast? Obviously the lion is the beauty and the ugly lady sitting next to is the beast. I mean, is this politically correct today? Probably not. But, people just laughed at that stuff. I mean, they didn't take everything so personally and awful. I mean, there was another slide towards the middle where the lady is, in her bloomers, and it's kind of cartoon characters. It's not like a photograph of a lady, but she's in her bloomers, and she's climbing over a fence, and the caption reads, "half over," because the show is half over, because she's half over the fence. I mean, it's cute stuff. And then once in a while, an announcer voice would come on, which was all recorded, and they'd say, "Your attention, please."
Your attention again. A wallet containing $450 has been found in the horseshoe. Would the rightful owner please form a line at the bar?
Because everybody's going to go, "That's mine, that's mine." They're going to go over and get their... I mean, you laugh at this stuff because it's human nature. It's fun. It's not made to make fun of any one particular person. And it would end with a old-fashioned sing-along where they had the pictures, and you'd follow the bouncing ball, and the picture would explain to you what words to say. It was "Down by the old mill stream, down by the old mill stream, where I first met you," with your eyes. They would have a piece of ice, eyes of blue. They'd have a picture of blue, dressed in gingham too. The curtain would open, and there were only 3 main performers. It would start out with one, and it would be Slewfoot Sue, and she was dressed up like the ornate lady of the saloon, and she was supposed to be, I guess, like the madam, but she was very pretty, a little older than the young girls who would be, shall we say, working the house back in the days of the old Wild West. There were the Can-Can girls, and there were usually 4 of them, sometimes 3. Once in a rare while, there'd be 5 because of swing shifts. There was Diamond Jim, who was the male host and supposedly like the owner of the Horseshoe. And you had the traveling salesman, who would come out in the middle of the show and interrupt, like, he'd come out from a side door after the other guy's just finishing his song, and he'd come out and he'd shoot his gun off in the air, bang, bang, and everybody would be like, and they used real guns. They used blanks, but they used real guns, and really loud, scare everybody, like, what's going on? And he was going to disrupt the show, and he'd come out with his carpet bag, and he'd say, you know, hey, here I am, I'm your traveling man. You know, he'd be coming out trying to do a stick, trying to sell you stuff. And then the host on the stage would talk down to him because he's down there on the floor with the guests. He's right there at your table. He's rubbing elbows with you, coming in, wearing his full getup, carrying his suit. And, you know, the host, Diamond Jim, would say, hey, pal, what are you shooting a gun off in here for? And he'd say, was I shooting a gun off? Yeah. And he'd say, you know, you scared everybody. And he'd say, well, I was scaring all the elephants away. And the host would say, well, there aren't any elephants in here, pal. And he'd say, by golly, it must be working then.
There are no elephants in here. By golly, it must be working then. Get out, man. That was a joke there.
They had a three-piece band down in the pit right in front of the thing. They had a drummer, they had a trumpet player, they had a piano player, and they would play the live music for the show that was going on. And at one point, the main guy, Diamond Jim, is up on top, and you know he's going to go into his next stick, and he'd say, hey, excuse me, folks, and he'd talk down to the piano player. He says, you know, excuse me, Joe, you know, are you paying attention? We're doing a show here. And he'd say, you know, piano player would be like, I'm paying attention, you know, and he'd say, you know, what are you reading down there? He'd say, you know, the Farmer's Almanac or something like that. And he'd say, can I see that? And he'd hand it up, and he'd show everybody that the Farmer's Almanac was really the Police Gazette. And he'd say, I know this is very risque for 1890, and it would sure shock all you ladies out there, but you know, today it's not too bad. As a matter of fact, then he'd start his song. Some fellas see the girl that they love in a dream. Some fellas see their love in a rippling stream. I saw the girl that I can't forget.
On the cover of the Police Gazette, if I could find her, life would be pages and oh, my search will never cease for the girl on the Police Gazette, for the putting on the coquette on the Police Gazette.
But there weren't many scenes. The show lasted maybe 20 minutes in runtime, but every minute of it had your connection, your personality. So I would always be a little kid sitting on that chair, thrilled and enamored with those artists who were giving these shows all the time. And each trip we went down, we would make our way to go see that Diamond Horseshoe, and we always had to have a front row seat. So my father, my poor father, had to get up early in the morning while we were still crashed out in bed, you know, in the hotel. We were over in the Contemporary. He'd have to get up 7 o'clock in the morning to get breakfast and go over and be at the Magic Kingdom when they opened that gate so he could get over there and be first in line to get the reservations. And I told him, I want table 13. And you might say that's an unlucky number, but it wasn't really 13. It was symbolic. Table 1-3 is 13 because that was front row, first row, row 1, table 3, center. That's where I had to be, right there behind the band, so I could look up and have the whole experience to myself. I mean, you can see it well anywhere else, but 13. And interestingly enough, each year we went, you would always see the same traveling salesman. How could this be? This is mind-boggling. How could it always be the same guy? Year after year, every show, it was the same guy. It got to the point that you didn't think about it at the beginning, but after a while you said to yourself, that's strange. How could that be? Well, they'd have a different Slewfoot Sue. They'd have a different Diamond Jim. I remember Jerry Siggins did it for a while, and David Hayne, and they had many ones that were the hosts. As a matter of fact, at one point in my Disney career, I tried out to be a host. They were going to have me as one of the guys. I was going to be Diamond Randy at the Diamond Horseshoe Revue, which is why I know the songs. But it's just amazing that the same guy was doing the traveling salesman shtick. So what are the odds of that? Well, as it turned out, many years later, we were sitting there, my family and I, and in comes, you know, the traveling salesman shooting his gun off, and it was somebody else. Our jaws dropped. We're looking at each other like, what happened? What happened? And this guy comes out, and he was an older man. He was tall, and he had horn-rimmed glasses, which the other guy didn't have glasses at all. And he would make his way out, and he had a different mannerism about it. He had a different shtick to him. And he was almost like on the edge of sarcastic, like hateful. That it was like, this is Disney World. It was couldn't believe, and he'd go up on the stage and he'd start telling you jokes. Now the other guy, the original guy's name was Bev. It was Bev Bergeron, amazing guy, and he had a very a grin, and he had a jovial way about him, and you just wanted to hug Bev and give him a squeeze, and you had a laugh about him. But the other guy was Bert Henry, and Bert Henry came out, and he almost worked blue. And if you know what that means, I mean, it's kind of like he actually was, in his day, a nightclub comic that was working blue with a lot of risque material on it. So here's Bert Henry as the traveling salesman at Walt Disney World and the Diamond Horseshoe Revue. Was like, how could this be? And his stick, while Bev would be kind of a magician, he was also a magician. He would do tricks with balls. He'd bounce them up in the air, and he'd talk to you, and the ball would land into his pocket of his his long coat from the 1890s. And he was amazing with the things he could do. Bert didn't do magic. So while Bev would make, balloon characters for, kids he would call up, Bert, he'd say, we need assistance from a young boy, young girl, because they had to, get the kid involvement part of the show. And he'd say to the audience, he says, what is a home without kids? He'd say, I'll tell you what it is, paid for and quiet. I mean, this is like Disney World, and here's all these kids. He'd say, no, a child really brightens up the house, never turns off one light from the time they get up to the time they go to bed. He'd say, I have 3 kids, one of each. This is 1980 something, and he'd say, I have 3 kids, one of each. And I mean, like, wow. He'd say, I have the inventor, 4 years old, called him the other day, putting baby alligators in the blender, told me he was making Gatorade. And the audience would wear. He'd say, I have the, trying to think, what was the other? I have the 8-year-old, never comes to the house when I call. The kid's gonna grow up to become a doctor. I have a teenage daughter. She ran away from home for 3 years. Nobody missed her. We all thought she was still in the bathroom. What I learned was Bert was the secondary traveling salesman. Bev was the main, Bert was the second. And all the years that we came, and we always had Bev Bergeron, it never occurred to us that anybody else did the part, because just by chance, our timing always had us with a show with Bev. But Bert did it maybe 3 times a week, where Bev did it 4 times a week, 4 days fight, because it was a 7-day-a-week show. Of course, they had somebody else doing it 365 days a year. So there were the 2 traveling salesmen. But what's really interesting, the Diamond Horseshoe was such a beloved show, such an iconic show. It didn't originate in Walt Disney World in Florida. It started at Disneyland in California at the Golden Horseshoe. So they called it the Golden Horseshoe in California, became the Diamond Horseshoe in Florida. And basically the same show. Of course, they had different people as their performers. But the traveling salesman icon in California was a man by the name of Wally Bogue. Wally Bogue was really an important man. He basically wrote the Diamond Horseshoe Revue, the Golden Horseshoe Revue. He wrote it. He was like Walt Disney's right-hand man for developing the park. He worked right with Walt Disney, and the Golden Horseshoe was Walt Disney's favorite show in all of Disneyland. And he was known to be seen sitting in the audience almost every day. He'd have to go see the Golden Horseshoe at least once. He loved that show. And Wally was the author and the comic relief. So when they opened Walt Disney World in Florida, the troupe came out from California. Wally Bogue himself came out along with Bev and Bert, and they started giving the shows. And after it was established, Wally, of course, went back to California, and who was the main in Florida was Bev Bergeron and, Bert Henry. And they did the shows all the years until they closed it in '86. So the stick with the traveling salesman, he would come out carrying his carpet bag, and he would have his different wares. He would try to sell you, he'd have the book that he'd open up and turn into a flame. He'd say, this book, it's got some of the hottest stories, and he'd say to somebody down in the audience, you look like a guy who would read a book like this. Your eyes are close together. And he'd open the book and it would turn into fire. It was a magic trick, and he'd close the book. But these things were in his carpet bag. And Bev would come out with his carpet bag, just like Wally and Bert. That was part of the deal. That was part of the show. When they opened the show at Walt Disney World in Florida, Wally Bogue gave Bev Bergeron his personal carpet bag from the Golden Horseshoe in California as a gift for the opening of Walt Disney World for Bev, who's going to be doing his part in this show. You really didn't know that. Nobody knew that. It was something between Wally and Bev, and probably some of the other cast members knew it at the time who were there. But that's really, really special that you were given the carpet bag that was on that stage in Disneyland all the years for the birth of this show that Walt Disney would watch all the time and was written by Wally himself. So Bev was entrusted with that carpet bag, and all the time I sat there and watched it, he'd pull stuff out of that bag I never knew. I just knew what a wonderful carpet bag with all the magic, almost like Mary Poppins in her carpet bag. It was really magical. Well, years later, when I became a cast member at Walt Disney World, I actually got to meet and become friends with these icons who I watched as a kid. And I remember the first time I was down in the cast member cafeteria in Fantasyland, and I saw Bev Bergeron and Slewfoot Sue and a couple of the dancers from the Diamond Horseshoe between shows come down. They're in costume between shows, they don't have long, to have lunch. And there they are, they're sitting a few tables away from me, having lunch like real people. It was like amazing, amazing. But eventually I got to know them. Bev was such a nice man, so wonderful. And we lost Bev about a year and a half ago, unfortunately. But a year or so before, Bev passed on, he entrusted me with something very, very special. Not only did he give me his original costume that he wore on that stage, but he gave me his carpet bag, the very carpet bag that was given to him by Wally Bogue, that had its day, that mesmerized and enchanted people on both stages of California, the Golden Horseshoe, and Walt Disney World's Diamond Horseshoe. And that is his carpet bag right there. And inside that carpet bag, there is there's a little holder that's attached to the side wall. And in there is his pistol, which he would pull out the pistol and shoot up in the air to scare all the elephants away. Came out of his carpet bag. There's an attached holster inside the carpet bag. Those boots you see next to the carpet bag, those are Bev's boots. He wore those boots on that stage as he did his little jigs and dancing along every single show. I was going to put him on, my tribute mannequin to Bev, but Bev's feet were smaller, so I couldn't get his boots on there. So his boots are standing out. I didn't want to damage his boots. But that's Bev's suit, his original blue striped suit. In later years, probably the early 80s, Bev got a new costume they made that was more of a tan and maroon colored checkered suit, which was more in recent memory. But this is his original suit in the blue, which he wore for the first probably, till 1980 in that area. The lady you see on the left, dressed in red and white, that is the part of Slewfoot Sue. Now, that is also an original costume. It's not from the Diamond Horseshoe. It is from the Golden Horseshoe. And that was Betty Taylor's costume. That was the finale costume that they wore during the show, where she is doing her skit with Pecos Bill, because the traveling salesman, Bev or Bird or Wally, would become Pecos Bill, and she would be Slewfoot Sue in her Wrangler suit, and that was her costume. Now, Betty Taylor was the original Slewfoot Sue at Disneyland, and Betty Taylor has passed on for a number of years now, and I was entrusted with Betty Taylor's suit from the Golden Horseshoe. So it's a fitting tribute to be up there along with Bev, and in the middle we have myself playing playing the part of Diamond Randy, dressed in the period 1990s type of suit that would be worn on the stage as I would sing my songs, Welcome You to the Diamond Horseshoe. And the guy in the yellow, the Randy to the yellow to the left, that is the official costume for the cast members who were working at the Diamond Horseshoe, who were either your host bringing you in behind the bar or serving you at your tables. That was the costume for the Diamond Horseshoe. They had a secondary costume for the Horseshoe, which was over on the right side, which is the black with the red and white stripe. That was also Diamond Horseshoe host type of suit. But the prevalent was the yellow, and the girls were in a similar suit as the yellow, but they were in a yellow dress. And, you know, that was the experience of the Diamond Horseshoe. Here's another one of my treasures from the Diamond Horseshoe. It's the seating time sign. Now, this is actually a magnetic sign that they were able to stick, and it was a little bit rounded because the fixed sign outside the building was a little bit of a rounded sign, and it would say about the Diamond Horseshoe, Slewfoot Sue, the traveling salesman, Pecos Bill, and the seating times would sometimes change according to park hours, but these were the standard times. I know that I would not have been there at 10:45, but I sure as heck would have been there at 1:45, 3:15, or 4:45, you know, and the shows begin 45 minutes after the seating time. So you would get there at 3:15. That was a 4 o'clock show. The reason we have the 10s here, these are the tencennial signs that were from the posts you found around Walt Disney World when they were celebrating their 10th anniversary, because the Diamond Horseshoe was still there during the tencennial, which would have been from 1981 to 1982. When they were celebrating tencennial, the Diamond Horseshoe was still the iconic show at the Magic Kingdom of Walt Disney World in Florida. So to go along with the tribute, of course, we have our tencennial signs. You know, even by the time they hit the 15-year celebration, the Diamond Horseshoe had closed, and they changed it to the Diamond Horseshoe Jamboree instead of the Diamond Horseshoe Revue. And the Diamond Horseshoe Jamboree was also a good show, but it wasn't the same as the Diamond Horseshoe Revue. It was more of a staged show presentation that didn't vary too much from its course. Nice, they actually had more characters in it. They added not just the 3 can-can girl dancers, they had 3 cowboy dancers. So they had a bigger crew, bigger staff. It was a little more interesting as far as the variety of the show. But the personality is from the performers. And Bergeron brought that show to life and made that show live. And we miss him every day, and I'm sure there's many people, anybody who saw the Diamond Horseshoe would remember exactly what they saw, particularly the part where they were doing Pecos Bill and the male host would punch Pecos in the mouth on a playtime, like he'd get punched, and he would turn and he would start spitting teeth, and he would go on and on and on, and he would spit tooth by tooth. He'd spit tooth by tooth. You'd see them flying out of his mouth into the audience, into the center of the audience, rows and rows down. He could spit them high and they'd go flying. They were white dried lima beans that he slipped into his mouth so that when he would act like he was getting punched, Bev would be, and the drum would be rolling spit, and it would be flying. And at one point, the piano player and the drummer had ping pong rackets, and he'd spit one down at them, and they would play ping pong back and forth to see how long they could hit his teeth back and forth in the air. I mean, people would be in hysterics as the next tooth is coming, the next tooth is coming. And then finally, it's just going on and on. He'd go slower, he'd lean back, he'd hold his hat also. He'd lean back, and then finally the last one, he'd come up and he'd go, he'd stick his tongue at you because he was out of teeth. It was so funny. But it's funny when I say about holding the hat, that's Bev's hat up on the top there. I don't know if you can see it, not through the chairs. Those chairs are from the Diamond Horseshoe as well. Those are the chairs that people sat on. And there were a lot more of them, of course. I didn't get them all, but that's the bent wood chairs that they had. But Bev's hat was actually cut on the top of it. It was a cut like a big cross that you can't really see, and it's cut if you went up there. And that was part of his stick. When he came in from the audience carrying his carpet bag and he walked up the side, there were steer horns that that were on the side wall coming up the steps. And he would take his hat off and he would swing it like this, and it would get speared on the steer horn, and that's where his hat would hang until the end of his stick where he would take his hat off. So it was cut so he could very easily shove his hat on there, and people think they just stuck it on the hat. It was very, very effective. But interestingly enough, can you see his hair? That's Bev's hair. I mean, that's kind of an odd thing to say. That's really Bev's hair. The reason for it is Bev was bald. And he used that as part of his shtick with the show. Bev would act like, it's hot under those lights. He'd, lift up his hat, and his hair would come off with the hat because it was a big toupee. And people would scream because they figured, oh my God, look at that. He made a mistake. He's bald. He lost his hair. And then he'd look at the audience like, like this, like he was caught in the act, and then he'd take his hair and he'd put it on sideways, say, this is a Hollywood convertible, and he'd turn it around so it was long in the front, he'd put it under his hat. And Bev Bergeron, we love you, Bev. Honest to God, that's the best. But Bev gave me his hair to go along with his tribute under his hat, his costume, his boots, and his carpet bag from Bev Bergeron and Wally Bogue. I mean, such an amazing, amazing story. The history that's there with the Diamond Horseshoe Revue, and it's here. It's preserved so it can live on. Where would it be if it wasn't for me? Who would remember? I remember. And I'm sure if you saw it, you remember, you know what these things are. Here they are for you on an amazing presentation right here in my world, the wonderful world of Randy. And I'm so happy you got to see this because it really, really is special. And we're going to show you more great stuff next time, but you know what? You're going to miss it because I bet you didn't subscribe to the Main Street Randyland channel. Did you push the subscribe button? Did you push it? Well, you got your chance right now. If you don't, you're going to miss the next episode, and you don't want to miss it because I'm telling you, this is great stuff. Really wonderful. So we'll see you next time, but only if you push subscribe. All right, guys. Bye-bye. Glad you enjoyed it. See you next time.